Hey everyone, welcome to this episode of Leading Innovation at Work, the special edition around the new normal. I am just over the moon with today's guest, one of my favorite people that I have the privilege of working with on the global IFMA board and so many other ways, Kate North. Kate, welcome to the show today.
Thank you, Lori. It is a pleasure and an honor to be here with you.
So Kate is very humble, but I will tell you, and I will wax on a little bit about Kate. I knew about Kate in the industry because I thought she was a remarkable thought leader, but I actually had the privilege of starting to work with her when I joined the global IFMA board, of which Kate is also a member. Kate is the Vice President of Workplace Advisory for Colliers, and she's also the Global Chair for Workplace Evolutionaries for IFMA WE. And we came on my radar a few years ago under Kate's leadership. Literally the best thought leadership in the world in any association around workplace strategy. And that is due to her leadership and her connections. So if we'll give her a chance to talk about at the end of the episode, but I just am blown away by how progressive and fresh the information has been in that we community. And Kate, how you've served people through COVID and really in a very agile way, in a very neutral way, helped IFMA and we serve that community of people that really needed that support. So thank you on behalf of our industry of the incredible service that you do for professionals everywhere.
Thank you. You know, this whole workplace evolutionary or we, right? It's been such a fantastic opportunity, honestly. When we started it, 7 years ago, when we first kicked off, we knew that the power of the collective would be very important going forward. And it has, through this whole COVID movement, it has been through this collection of great thought leaders from around the globe in a variety of different disciplines. You know, we're not going to solve it through our silos or through the lens of the past. It has always been around bringing more diversity, more inclusion into solving some of these types of problems. And I have to say, it's I'd like to take credit for it, but it is truly through we, the group coming together and the wonderful leaders that we have. And, opportunities. I mean, if people want to talk about something new, there's just an opportunity to bring that forward really quickly in that energy. So that's been the goal.
Well, Kate, you've been a curator of some incredible thought leadership through that association. But as a side note, I also think you're one of the most positive people I've ever met. I love your spirit. I love how kind and fun you are. And I think, that as a woman leader in our profession, as well as your incredible knowledge of our industry, just makes you just such a wonderful human to work with. And I'm just so proud to know you. And thank you for being on today's show, because I can't wait to ask you questions around what you think is the future. We've been going through so much uncertainty in the last 6 months, but, I think through any time of adversity in human history, there's been some lesson. And I've really tried to focus on that in the book, that the new normal that we just published. And that's why you were one of the first thought leaders that I thought of when we thought about this podcast series, because I really think there's some lesson, and you're such a positive person, and there's always some yin and yang to these difficult situations. I would really love to hear your thoughts, and just from the limited knowledge of what we have in this day and age, and what we know so far, what do you think is what lesson have we learned from this experiment in COVID that we've learned from in the last 6 months? What do you think is going to stick around, and what kind of indelible mark will be left on the way we work in the future? I'd just love to hear your thoughts and ideas.
Well, great question. And one that, I'm constantly contemplating. I think we all are, as we kind of moved through the different cycles since COVID happened in March. We're very different today than we were, 6 months ago. But I love that question, Lorri. You're always such a, good thinker. And I'd have to say that what I believe will continue and what we've gone through is that people are thinking differently about how they work. So this notion of being able to have a distributed workforce is actually a reality. Being able to provide people with higher levels of choice is definitely a reality. So, we have gone through such an amazing time, the past 6 months. Think about all of the different phases and cycles that we're going through individually, as teams, as families, as organizations. And none of these experiences are going to allow us to go back. We can't. We've gone through the threshold. So I think about the things that will stick and that are really positive, especially from a kind of a silver lining approach, is that we have really reinvented a new way of work. I'm going to use the term distributed work. But, when everybody was asked to, start working at home, we did so quickly. We, within minutes, people were actually starting to deploy. And I think that the timing was right. Products like the technology that made it easier to adapt allowed people to do that. And then once, we started gathering research and data and found out that people were productive, that managers did know how to manage people remotely, that people were, seeing increased levels of well-being. And that the executives witnessed this and they were part of it. That I think that once that happened, then people said, well, maybe we should consider this. Because I think about the decades that I spent before trying to convince organizations to think about flexible work models and the resistance. Oh, how will we know if they're working? So I think this has been a great experiment for us to know that we can work differently than we've worked before. So I think that is a big piece. Now, I think as we're moving into this next cycle, that we're also looking at how do we sustain that? How do we do this amongst the stressors of life? Those with children of having a very different experience. But then also, how could we begin to use it as a catalyst, a strategic catalyst? I get so excited when I hear organizations thinking, wow, this is opening up opportunity for us to attract talent regardless of where they live. And that, teams that are really investing in things like, developing team norms and rethinking how they're working, more, I see more adoption towards some of the agile practices, and they're really getting good at it. So I think that piece of reframing how we think about work will continue. And I think through this piece is that we've also realized how wonderful it is to be together. So, I think we've experienced, the work from home and what works, what doesn't work, how you can potentially make that better. But then also, how will we think about being together? Why would you come into an office in the future? What is it that you're going to need? And so much of that has to do around culture, around community, about being together to quickly, innovate and to share ideas. So I think that's going to stay with us, and it will take different shapes for different organizations and different industries, but that will stick.
Oh my God, Kate, there's so many things in there that I think are so astute. And just a few things I want to underline is, I think you're right. We have been living in a giant lesson over the last 6 months. If we ever wondered about our potential to work with mobility, this has been the biggest living experiment that we've ever had. And if we ever wondered about our potential, we now have evidence that a certain demographic of our employees can be virtual, right? But we also know now loud and clear who can't work remote. And so from there, I think that it's been evidence in this experiment of how we can work remote and what our potential is. And to your point, I do see organizations looking at and rationalizing their space, not only the amount of space that they need, but how they use the space. And so working remotely, one of the things I miss is seeing people like you, Kate, is,
Same.
and I miss our in-person interaction so much. But I think the office is going to be used very differently in the
I
remember, hey, Kate, do you remember before COVID, our biggest complaints about the office were it was too noisy, I can't get any work done, and there's not enough meeting space, right? And I think that we've realized that we can be productive working remote, but I miss you and I want to work with, collaborate with my colleagues and ideate. So I want to be away from the office part of the time to have those deep thoughts and study contracts or do those focus work activities. But I also want to build rapport with my colleagues and collaborate. And it's very hard to be innovative and talk about new innovative concepts remote. And for those times, I want to be together. So I think you're right. The office is going to have a very different purpose in the future, not just the amount of space, but how we use the space. Do you see that as well?
Oh, definitely. And I think that the bottom line is that a new way of working can really begin to offer individuals the ability to choose based upon what they do, their work-life balance, their teams, all of those different things. And in the past, we haven't had that level of fluidity. We've been more siloed and more structured, and we have battled the issues with disruptions in the office. So, working from home, if you're a good candidate for that, that does allow you to control your environment and you can get into deep flow. I think, what we're finding is that oftentimes, in order to be able to really maintain it, the individual's got to be empowered to turn off notifications, schedule time, not every 30 minutes in between calls, but to really reframe your day. Think about how, if you're a morning person and your cognition's higher, why not block out time in the morning for those focused activities and then maybe buzz into the office and be able to do that great collaborative work, et cetera, that is so vitally important.
Kate, I think one of the things, and you've mentioned it in example, but I think, one of the wake up calls we've had is work is what you do, not where you are.
That's right.
Right. And I think that it's really caused us to be much more purpose driven around how we work. So if I want to go into the office, if I have a day of focus, I would probably not go to the office. But if I have a day where I have meetings, then I probably would go to the office because then I want to collaborate and ideate and do some of those things in person. But productivity is very personal. And I think that the last 6 months has been, we've taken it out of our subconscious mind into our conscious mind. And what I do, and I did this even before COVID, but I think now have even greater enablers for it. I would look at my work week, see what I'm doing, and then I would decide where I'm going to work based on the activities I have for that week. Isn't that funny?
No.
Whereas, 10 years ago, 15 years ago, I would go to the same oatmeal colored cubicle every day and do the same, do whatever work I would try to do. It didn't matter what kind of work. It was hard for focus work. And I think we're a lot more aware of the choices. And I think those choices are going to accelerate. Do you feel the same?
Oh, I totally agree. And, part of this is that I think we're also foundationally seeing HR and real estate and IT, the dream team that we've always talked about, actually working more together. The focus not only on the physical experience, but also on the digital. And I think by having HR's involvement and also their oversight on wellness, on engagement, having them really helping to be a part of this type of a strategy and certainly creating a hybrid for the future that allows for that wonderful fluidity that you talk about, that we're going to be able to also see more consciousness around how we feel in the different environments. So perhaps at home, it may be, that there will be a stipend or different types of things so people can set up a really good home office that allows for them to work at their best and doesn't do harm. Get out of that kitchen, off that kitchen table, but really, have good chairs, good lighting, some of those things. I think having the technology, I think people are realizing that if you can get your employees trained in agreement around how they're going to leverage the technology and all the different levels of Teams and some of the apps that you were talking about can also enhance not only productivity, but also well-being because you're not as stressed. So I think there's this, this piece that's coming together that it takes that integration between the place, the people, and the technology that are going to start to shift foundationally how we're working.
I totally agree. I do see a lot of HR professionals having to pivot fairly quickly to evolve the kind of benefits for employees. So, for example, the in-office fitness centers are probably going to evolve away to people getting subsidies for at-home fitness programs, for example. So I do actually have an expert coming in from HR to talk about, the future of HR benefits. But, Kate, I think even before COVID arrived, I think us in real estate and FM were really starting to pivot. Instead of it being about real estate, it became about the occupants and employees and designing workplaces that really enable productivity. And I think the change that we were experiencing is that, like we said, work is what you do, not where you are. What do you think that the future will hold for real estate and facilities management professionals, given that there's been, the definition of workplace has been extended to all sorts of places? How do you see that evolving the profession of FM and real estate?
Oh, I think we're going to go through a massive transformation. I think we're starting to see signs of it. I think we're seeing more HR leaders taking a lead around defining the employee experience and crossing over into more of the physical. And I think, as mentioned, earlier, is that will bring some good things along with that. I think we'll be thinking more broadly about truly the human potential and that human-centered approach. How do we leverage every moment to support the work, not hinder it, and to support the individual so that they are, thinking about what they're doing and how they can do it best, and some of the magic that occurs when you are in that state of flow and that you're in an environment that supports it. So in terms of what we'll need to perhaps change is we've been, this dream team, right? The HR, IT, and real estate and facilities coming together. So many organizations are still siloed. They report in differently. They have different budgets. They have different metrics, and it's been difficult to achieve that. I think that we're going to see deeper integration, and I also believe that we're going to see HR being much more involved, if not leading a lot of those aspects of it. And as I think about the space, it's interesting. Everybody wants to know, well, can I get rid of space if everybody works from home? And you start maybe with those crazy questions, but it's really around what is the strategy? How can you create a strategy that supports the productivity and the business goals? I think that's where you start. And I think that will, if we focus in on developing strategy, the alignment with HR and FM and IT, will all start to come together in a much more holistic and sustainable way. So I know we launched the workplace management courses, which I'm so pleased with. If you haven't seen it, you need to look at it. But it speaks to exactly this new way and to rethink about the role of facilities, the role of real estate, and how do we deepen that so that what we do brings the highest level of value in an integrated way. So I think we're going to see more training. I think we're going to see a different types of metrics. I think in the past, where we thought that utilization and density were the most important metrics, I don't know about you. I'm not interested in going into a highly dense environment anymore. I think that we're all much more aware of air quality and how a space feels almost psychologically. Does it feel like a safe place? Are we controlling that environment? What does it smell like? What does it feel like? What's the lighting like? All of those things we've become, I think, much more sensitive towards. So I think that the role of the FM specifically will be geared towards serving and the experience and in ways that perhaps we haven't touched before.
I couldn't agree with you more. I think it's just going to take us to how we serve our constituents, which is the occupants of the building, in a completely different way. They are at the center of the decisions and our communication and everything that we do. So I think we were going in that direction, but I think we've skipped a couple of years to that benefit and putting employees at the center. I loved what you said. When you think of productivity, it's very personal. There's introverts and extroverts and people at different points in their careers. And like, there's so many variables. There's not one size fits all. If nothing else, I think that the amount of choice to enable productivity has just gone way up. And that, I think, is a good thing. And I think professionals, real estate and facility professionals, will just have to adopt. I think, like I said, we were going in that direction. But I want to hear more about, you mentioned we management and some of the examples and principles. Could you maybe just unpack a little bit more? Tell us more about we management, what inspired the development of that capability, and just more about what it is and what it
Sure.
hopes to achieve.
Yeah, the workplace management program came from some good work that had started by Andrew Mawson and a group of experts out of the UK. And they had developed this framework with the desire of how do you create a more holistic, more sustainable way forward? How do we take ourselves out of just operational, but really think about setting that type of strategy? And so the course is broken up into 4 different modules that dive into different things. So the first one may be really around the alignment of the physical space to the business goals. So, how do you develop, stakeholders, and how do you ensure that what you're doing is going to align with the business as it changes, which is very different than what we've done before in the past. And so, it's a great framework of not only how do you get that type of a conversation going with an executive and a leadership team? How do you extract out the right kind of metrics on how do you measure the success of a given facility and environment? The other piece that I think is so needed, especially now, is this piece around change management. What is change management? How do we do it? How do we build that into all of these projects so that it becomes not an add-on at the end, but it becomes the process itself. And that's an important one. There's a great piece that they're doing recently that is so applicable to COVID, and that is capacity management and understanding how do we really think about the capacity and how we measure that, how do we moderate that, looking at the different constituents that come into projects like project management. What is the lens of a project manager versus that of, the others that come in throughout this whole process. So it's really taking an end-to-end approach, or actually it's probably more of a cycle around how you begin to use this framework into any project and to give you the tools. There's wonderful tools. The classes are very engaging. You're building a wonderful community and network of others like you that are going through this. You're basically having to play back what you've learned in different types of experiments or experiences. So it's a very hands-on program. Chris Hood and others, bringing in Andrew Levin and others through this process, you're able to really leverage the incredible expertise and wisdom of people that have been doing this work for their, entire careers. So it's just a wonderful way to, I think, up your game and to focus more on the broader experience.
Kate, it sounds like not only it's an idea, but it sounds like it has practical advice on how to actually apply it, which is so important, because I think too often we talk about these high level ideas, but not enough like practical, tactical kind of steps to make progress. And it sounds like it really is very hands on in its applicability. Is that right?
Oh, definitely. And it's a safe space too, so people can ask good questions. You hear from your peers so that you get some really great diverse learning and diverse thinking throughout. And then all of the materials are available so that you've got frameworks to use the next day. So yes, you're absolutely right.
Kate, if there's any links to Workplace Evolutionaries and some of the things that you've mentioned, or the COVID resource library, or any of the other extensive, great thought leadership materials that are available through Workplace Evolutionaries, if you're not already a member, I'll put the links at the bottom of this podcast so that you can just easily click on them and access them. But please check them out. And Kate, I got to thank you so much for your leadership and the incredible service that you do for our association and the professionals in it. And, it doesn't matter where we work. I think we're such a small community of professionals. We have to help each other. And I love the spirit in which you do that. And I thank you so much for the great service and your leadership.
Well, thank you, Lori, and back at you. I mean, look at what you're doing. Look at the book, look at these podcasts. Honestly, you're helping to really do exactly what we set out to do, and that is to change the world one workplace at a time.
That's right. That's right. So we'll provide those links. Kate, thank you so much for participating today. We'll make sure that you have all of the links below. Kate, if somebody wanted to connect with you directly, what's the best way for them to follow you and hear more of your amazing advice?
Yeah. So I'll certainly include that in the information that I send to you, but LinkedIn, email, come to any of the WE events. I love people's thinking and what they're going through. And it's really through the collective that we're going to be able to create solutions we can't even yet imagine. So I welcome that dialogue.
Kate North, thank you so much for being such a stellar guest today. It's always such a privilege and a pleasure to see you. I miss you. I can't wait to tip a glass with you when we're in person next. But in the interim, I thank you so much for being a guest today and all of your incredible advice. And thank you.
Thank you. Have a good one.
Thanks, Kate.